someone is experiencing grief, should we be dating or do we take a pause?
If we've lost somebody and we go on the dating app like 2 weeks later because we feel like being distracted and we're like craving a sense of connection, or we're doing something to numb ourselves, it's a flat out no, because we're really fragile.
Does this include like one night stands?
It includes one night stands.
Oh.
I don't want a distraction that comes to you where you feel emptied and more disconnected, because maybe you had a hope after that one night stand that they might call you back.
This is great that you're here because I actually lost my sister last year. It's been really hard to navigate the dating world after all this grief, because it's like you're a completely different person and a lot of people don't know how to handle that grief.
Well, that's a lot, because the truth is it's different for everybody.
Hey, it's Matchmaker Maria, and I'm your host of the Ask a Matchmaker podcast. I give no nonsense dating advice, which that actually is on the cover of my new book that you can pre-order. Link in the show notes. All right, now that we got that out of the way, remember, dating is a privilege, and I'm here to equip you to make better choices to have greater experiences. This week, we are joined by my co-host, Jenny Zigrino. Welcome back.
Hello.
I'm so excited to have you here, and it's our last episode together.
I know, I'm sad. Unless the fans email now.
Nag away. I love emails. Let's go. By the way, speaking of emails, if you have a question you want to email the podcast, askamatchmakerpod@gmail.com.
Yeah.
And while I have you on the internet, I want you to follow our co-host, Jenny Zigrino. Follow this podcast. And if you haven't done so already, because you're lazy, you're going to follow me at Matchmaker Maria.
And pre-order the book.
And pre-order the book.
Yes.
Let's keep doing that. Let's switch the tone a little bit, though, because today's episode is a little different, and it's something that I know a few people need to hear. Dating can be tough, but it can even be more tough when we are grieving. What we'll be discussing today is navigating love after loss. That's why I'm excited to welcome Gina Martha as our guest for this week's episode. Gina, welcome to the Ask a Matchmaker pod.
Thank you so much.
Let's tell people why you're here.
I am here for us to talk about dating. How do we do it? When do we do it? What are the weird things in between doing it? And should we do it?
And tell us a little bit more about why you're an expert in this.
Well, I have been a grief and trauma therapist for the past 20 years. And a lot of the people who come to see me are in the midst of either death losses or big breakups and divorce, a lot of life transitions. And it's really important, to connect. And we really deeply want to feel connected and feel like we belong in love again. And so it's a really important part of the work that I do for the past 20 years is really trying to help people navigate, how do I take care of myself, but also navigate the outside world and put my heart back in it again.
I love that. And you also wrote a book.
I did.
Can we show that book right now?
We sure can. The hardcover or the soft cover, where you can buy this anywhere books are sold. It is called Moving On Doesn't Mean Letting Go.
This is great that you're here because I actually lost my sister last year. And it's been really hard to navigate the dating world after all this grief, because it's like you're a completely different person and a lot of people, don't know how to handle that grief. Because dating's supposed to be fun and lighthearted and like, oh my God, ha ha, and sexy. And then they go, how many siblings do you have? And then I got to be like past or present? What are we talking about? So it can be really hard to navigate who deserves to hear the grief, how do you know someone is ready for that grief? And then also too, the breakup, I had a breakup too. So it's like, then there's compounding grief. Yeah.
Well, that's a lot, because the truth is it's different for everybody, right? And who you are is a fundamentally different person.
Mm-hmm.
And you're Jenny, the comedian, who has known and knows herself as somebody who's out there being lighthearted and talking about love in this easy way. And all of a sudden you're thrust onto this different planet with absolutely no map, no structure. And yet, you still have to chart this course.
Yeah.
And so for me, I always say it's about time. In a lot of ways. And we think is time that is this healer. It isn't, but it does facilitate things. And so I always say that we have to know ourselves. We have to be able to check in with ourselves. Are you ready to take a risk when you're in a place where your feelings are in flux all the time, right? Imagine when you're going through loss for the very first time, like in the very beginning of it. It's fresh. You're like, you don't know what you feel. You don't have any memory of things. You have brain fog. It's like affecting everything. It's a full body experience. And yet now you have to go out and try to get to know somebody.
Yeah.
And they're getting to know you while you don't even know who you are right now.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part, because you're like, the most important person in my life, in my immediate family, is no longer here. The person I go to, the person that I tell these stories to, and now I have that additional loss. And so if somebody's asking me questions and they don't give me the answer I need, you know, that's empathetic, that's caring, that's curious. It's like, do I want to talk about it, or do I want them to not ask me? And either way, it feels shitty, because I don't want to ignore the fact that this important loss in my life just happened, but I also don't want to be totally bummed out on a date. And so that's why I always say, and I don't usually like lay the groundwork for not dating during loss, but in this case I do. I think we have to give it at least 6 months, at least almost a year if possible, because we're a different person and we're navigating who we are in this world.
Yeah.
And I can even go on. When we're starting relationships, it's like we're starting because we want to be curious about people. We want to get to know people. We want them to get to know us. But there's a relationship dynamic, right? They will need to know us.
Yeah.
And we will need to know them. And can we meet someone else's needs while we're in the midst of like feeling emptied out and hollowed?
Yeah.
And traumatized by this. So there are a lot of questions in this. It's really tricky sometimes to navigate it, because it involves really checking in a lot with us and where we are.
I think one thing that has been difficult is the time aspect of, now I feel incredibly rushed to get to the next step in life, to find the partner, to have the kid, to do all that, because she didn't get the chance to do it. And now it feels very much on me, and very much on like, I have to make the legacy of the family go on.
Produce the grandchildren.
I gotta like, and then if I produce the grandchildren, that brings joy back into the family.
See, I think when you started what you were about to say, I didn't think it was going to go in that direction.
I didn't either.
I thought you were
Where do
going
you
to
think
say,
it was going to go?
Oh, well,
I'm interested.
And I'm wondering if Gina felt the same way. When you started your sentence, I thought it was going to go to like, I feel rushed to talk about it.
Yeah.
No. I'm very open. See, the thing is, I'm so open about it, but I'm very much like, like I have a time limit now. Not a time limit, but like I don't have time for bullshit as much.
Okay.
And I feel like that comes off in the dating world.
Do you think your bullshit
horrifying.
Do you think your bullshit meter became more sensitive?
Yes.
Can I ask you a really personal question?
Yeah.
And if you don't want to answer, it's fine.
Yeah.
But like, were you expecting your sister to pass away, or was it sudden?
No, she died suddenly. Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, she died suddenly. The world surrounding her death is a little muddy. There's a lot of anger and frustration and like there. And also too, she died of fentanyl. So it's like when you go now as like but it's in a way it's like everyone knows somebody now who's passed from fentanyl. So it's like you might go date someone, they're like, oh, my cousin, that happened to my cousin, that happened to whatever. So it's like weirdly connecting in some ways.
Interesting.
Yeah, because you're like, people understand it and people get it more. The way it feels now is I have seen that like life is so fragile and and that it can end at any time. Like my sister came back from a big trip and was like ready to start her life over, and then it was just like, okay, not anymore. So now I'm like, I'm so rushed to like complete the next phases of life.
Was she your older sister or younger sister?
Yeah, a year and a half.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So we were like...
My sister's a year and a half younger than me, so like I feel, even though I have not experienced this, I empathize with like losing... I think two sisters, it's like way beyond it's such a soulmate connection for a lot of people, especially when you're only a year and a half apart.
Yeah.
You don't remember your life. I mean, you literally don't know your life without her.
Yeah.
But I don't, as the older sister, I don't remember my life without her.
Yeah.
You know, I've been told that there was a year and 4 months where she didn't exist, but I certainly...
And you were the happiest that you
Was I?
will ever be.
Maybe.
You had the most attention.
Maybe. Yeah, I got the most attention then. But, you know, my sister and I, we also work together. And, like, you know, I look at the way our children are. They're like siblings.
Yeah.
Whereas my husband and his sister, those cousins are proper cousins, their relationship. And I think that's a testament to like what a sisterly bond does. And, you know, hearing how you lost, it just kind of made me think like, oh God, I don't even want to picture that life, you know, even if we're, you know, 70-year-old biddies, I don't want to live without her, you know, like it's just that. And so I think it's such a sibling loss is such a profound loss.
It's out of order.
Yeah, it's out of order.
Really
totally.
out of order loss too.
It's an out of order, but there are remember when. They're our history and they're our future.
Yeah.
And they're who we grow old with. And they remember things when we don't. And that is it. They're our best friend as we get older.
Yeah.
And through the years, but
yeah.
So were you dating anyone when she passed?
Well, so I was dating someone before she passed, and it ended. I mean, the way it ended was just like the most explosive, crazy way it ended. And it was nice to have her to talk to about it. This last one has been extra hard because I don't have her to talk to. And she would be great and be like, he's such a dick. What a piece of shit. And I like, it's nice to hear that from her. So I imagine it in my head. I hear her voice be like, he's such a piece of shit. And I'm like, yeah, he is. He's not. He's fine, everybody.
Are you currently dating?
I'm dating, but nothing's hitting.
So here's my question. Do you feel, aside from everything you just said about feeling rushed, do you feel ready to be fully invested in a relationship?
How do you know if you're ready?
I think that, you know, and now listen, this is grief world.
Yeah.
You can actually like go about your life and not be totally sideswept by thinking about the loss every single time, right? Grief integrates into who we are. You feel as if you can invite life in again, and that it's not a force, but it's because you actually want it. It's not obligation. Because everything I'm hearing from you is like, life is fragile.
Yeah.
I have to fulfill obligations. I'm the only
legacy.
one. Yeah,
legacy.
I have to hold the torch and bring it forward for the family. And like, yeah, that's terrible. It's because, like, please don't.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you don't even know who you're attracting. Because everything feels like you've upped the ante. Like, would you be choosing this person if you didn't feel fragile? If you didn't feel like there was a timeline? If like some invisible family member wasn't like, Jenny, you got to fulfill your legacy. That torch is blowing out. No, would you be choosing the people that you choose? And I think that the answer would be different.
Okay.
Because now you're in a place where you feel, and forgive the word, but like desperate.
Yeah.
And that's not how we want to go into dating in the best of circumstances.
Yeah.
And especially after grief, where you are a totally different person and you're going through a trauma. You have not left the trauma of it.
Yeah.
And it is in your body, it's in your nervous system, and your nervous system is going to be sort of the one calling the shots. And so for me, it's like, we use the word healing a lot in mental health and in grieving and all of that, but there's no real healing. There's just the acceptance that this is what your life looks like right now, and it becomes a part of you and you carry her with you. But because it's so soon and it's still a trauma, the idea of going forth in the world has to be at a place where you feel really supported, really able to be unmasked. And this is like in the best of dating circumstances.
Yeah.
And to have your priorities be about what is going to be best for you long term.
Yeah.
Not just to be like, I must do this right now because time is running out. Because at the end of the day, you might choose the wrong person and you might actually wind up not knowing what you've gotten yourself into, because now the dynamic, you've come into it with a dynamic that's not what your normal dynamic would be.
Yeah.
And so and the feedback might be harsher, right?
Yeah.
If you're not able to give something to somebody because you are really in the midst of something. And grief is always with us, unfortunately, right? It doesn't like leave one day. There's no threshold we cross over just to feel better. It's like slowly.
Especially when you think about also like relationship milestones. Like you were just telling us about how you wish you could call your sister after a date broke off.
Yeah.
But imagine now when it gets better.
Oh, yeah.
Like when things go well, like, oh my God, he's my boyfriend. Can't talk to my sister. We got engaged. Can't talk to my sister. We're getting married.
Yeah.
She's not there. I'm having a baby. She's not holding her. Like, or him. Like, I don't know. You might have a boy.
I would only have girls.
You look
I will only have girls.
You look like a girl mom.
I'm
Way
getting
to
a boy.
pass
I
down the
know I'm
legacy,
going to
by
get a
the
boy.
way.
What?
Way to pass down the legacy.
I know the world's going to curse me with a boy. Not that boys are bad, but they're
not
a
bad.
lot.
It's a different kind
They're
of
going
love.
to be so much.
It's
anyway.
the best. No, you know what? So if someone is experiencing grief where it is in the midst of it, right? It's still not fully integrated into our full identity. We're still trying to come to terms with it. Should we be dating or do we take a pause? Like I think you mentioned something before about 6 months.
I think that we need to realize that when we are dealing with a loss, and I'm talking about fresh loss.
Yeah.
If we've lost somebody and we go on the dating app like 2 weeks later because we feel like being distracted and we're like craving a sense of connection, or we're doing something to numb ourselves, it's a flat out no, because we're really fragile.
Does this include like one night stands?
It includes one night stands.
Oh.
Because what we're trying to do is connect, numb, or distract. And although I'm good with distractions, I don't want a distraction that comes to you where you feel emptied and more disconnected. Or you wind up feeling worse afterwards because maybe you had a hope after that one night stand that they might call you back. And now you're like, great, I feel fucked up anyway. And now I'm rejected. And now I'm grieving something more.
It's all residual now.
Yeah. I mean, there's better distractions during this particular
like
time.
What?
Like Netflix. Like cookies. I mean, I think I baked cookies. Like, I know that's like very light, right? But I certainly wasn't out having a one night stand despite the invites. But I think
are people inviting you?
When you're grieving, some people go, yeah, that's it. That's the one for me now.
There's
really?
the vulnerability factor.
Yeah. And people want to save you too. They want to save you.
I feel like I witnessed
from your
this one of
sadness.
my girlfriends. She became a widow with a lot of kids.
Yeah.
Out of the blue. And I didn't, and now she's dating someone that I set her up with.
Okay. Hello.
Thank you. But I waited like 3 years before even mentioning dating. But I remember when she was like a recent widow within 3 months. I was like, so how's it going? She goes, well, this guy invited me out the other day. And I'm like, oh, why? Like, I was like, you're 3 months fresh with kids. Like, that seems, and I said to her, that guy seems like, I didn't even know the terms, but I was like, this guy seems like a vulture.
Yeah, it sounds like a savior. Like
the savior complex.
The savior complex. I'm gonna make her feel good. I'm gonna make her feel better.
Yeah. And would you date this person if you didn't go through this trauma of loss? And I think that's the question we have to ask ourselves too. And am I so fragile right now that any sort of disruption in my sense of self will tumble me over? I think we don't realize after loss how fragile we really are. And we really have to take into account that every day will feel different. We might have like a really good day where we're like, cool, I feel like myself again. I just laughed at something. I'm like hanging out with friends. And then the next day you're like, fuck, I don't know what just happened. But like yesterday was great, but today I'm a mess. I don't know if you've experienced that, but
oh yeah. It just sweeps you off your feet, and then you're like, well, I'm in for the day. Oh, this is a grief day. They don't happen really anymore. But in the early beginning they did a lot, and then I didn't start dating till about 8 months after.
Okay.
So 8 months after it happened, I met this my last boyfriend, who, even like looking back on it, I still would have dated, but I can also see elements of my sister in them.
Ooh.
Which I was like, oh, okay. Like, you think you go in being like, well, I'm equipped for this, and now it's like, there was probably me trying to be like, I can fix this in some way.
Because I couldn't fix her.
Because I couldn't fix her, I can like fix this.
Yikes.
So
I can help someone else feel.
But also, again, my bullshit meter, in the way I think I would have stayed in that relationship longer had I not lost my sister, because I would have put up with more shit.
Huh.
And now that I'm just like, next, like, okay, bye. Like and because I have the self-respect, my self-respect got more when she passed. So I was able to cut that relationship off at like 6 months. Yeah. And be like, bye.
Yeah. I think that's a really common experience and a good one, because I think
your bullshit meter is better.
Yeah. Across the board. For people, friendships.
Yeah.
You see who shows up, who doesn't, who can actually tolerate loss and grief, be there for the birthdays, anniversaries, days of meaning, and not be like, oh, you're still talking about that? Like, oh, you're still upset about your sister?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, or why are you upset? It's the holidays. Like,
yeah. It's your birthday.
Yeah.
Don't be sad.
And it's like so common because we're in such a grief illiterate society that we just want
illiterate society.
We don't know anything about grief, despite the fact that all of us will experience it in some form, because it's not. It's just
ironic
death
because I feel like in the United States, there's a lot of grief.
You get a week off and then you have to go back to work.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky. So I actually have a question. So I dated a person for a month in, their dad died.
Okay.
How do you deal as the person who's dating someone who's going through grief?
How do you support them?
That's a great question. I think first and foremost, you have to be very aware that you're going in to meet somebody at at their worst.
Yeah.
And that you have to really kind of manage your own expectations of what you want them to give you. And now, I also think that that's really a hard time to be dating somebody. On the flip side of that, right? You want to support them by saying, I'm here as needed. But again, so when I talked about the dating dynamic, it's like the person who's lost needs a lot more, right? So they weigh a lot more in the very beginning. So you have to expect that your needs are not going to be met in the same way that it might be met. They might be met in a normal circumstance or before times. And so I think it's just important that we have to say, like, I'm here for you. I will always listen. Whenever anything comes up, you have to be honest, though. And I think it's hard for us to share as the dating griever, you know, all the times that we feel the most vulnerable and fragile with somebody new, because we don't want to like scare them away or push them away or make them feel like, oh, I'm a basket case. Like, no pun intended.
Yeah, but how do you also establish boundaries in that context too? Like, I've been in situations where I was dating someone and something like traumatic happened, and then suddenly I was kind of like, I don't want to say emotional punching bag, but I felt like I had to give them grace more than I would have. I don't think I've ever allowed someone that much emotional manipulation in my life since then. Like, I felt like, I mean, it took me years to get over. Like, I was already married to someone else, and I was still thinking about it, about the trauma that came with being around that trauma. The trauma that came with being around that trauma. That wasn't even mine, but it was like a lot of manipulation and giving them grace constantly.
Why did you stay in it?
Because I felt like we were together for 6 months, and I felt like he needed someone. Because he made me feel like, oh, when I'm with you, I feel at peace.
He could have called me. Not as a person, but as a therapist.
No, you know, Irish people.
Oh, they're not calling anybody.
They're not calling any therapists. Come on. Anyway, but it really affected my psyche, my emotional well-being. I mean, to be honest, if it weren't for that, I don't know if I would have chosen the healthy people I chose after. Yeah. Because I was like, well, that's what that looks like. Like, I also, I think this is weird. I think I had a curiosity of like, ooh, what's my bottom? Oh. Where can how far can this go? Yeah. That I feel like before I start ripping my hair out. Like, and that's like a inner thought, deep down, hate to admit sort of thing, but it's true. And so to me, it's like, I always think about like, okay, you just started dating. That was such a great question, Jenny. Yeah. You just started dating someone who just lost someone. You want to be supportive. Yeah. And I don't think when you think about it, it's like, well, I love you. My support is not, conditional. You know, no. But at the same time, it's like, okay, but like, where's the boundary on like, how much am I supposed to support you while you're going through this?
I think that women tend to give a lot more in relationship in general, and so we're going to probably have more empathy for somebody going through something hard for a longer period of time. I don't think we should say, I'm going to see what my threshold is. I think we should say, or like, how bad can it get? How few needs can be met by this person? But I think we really have to think of ourselves, what do I need that I'm not getting from this? Because putting your needs aside does nobody any good, because you then brew resentment over time. So I'm answering your question in a country road backdoor way, which is my saying, I still don't think it's a great idea to date them, even on the flip side. Because at the end of the day,
I stopped dating them.
To me, it's the same thing, because I would be giving the advice to the griever. Are you ready to be dating Jenny?
Yeah.
You know, are you in a place where you can give something to Jenny? Are you in a place where you're going to need so much from Jenny that Jenny doesn't know where her needs begin and end, you know, or where your needs end? And so the boundaries are already skewed in this one dimension.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? The dynamic is already skewed. And so I think that if said person whom you were supporting had a good therapist, had a great support team and system, knew themselves, and knew that they had to go very slowly into dating and check themselves at all times, that they weren't promising something they couldn't deliver or trying to ask something of someone that person couldn't give, that would be important. This is why I'm just like, don't do it, because we're not ourselves.
Yeah.
We're kind of like, it's like when grief happens, we throw everything into a pile right in front of us, and it's all set on fire, and we've got to like pick through it and see what's most important out of this wreckage that I take forward with me in my life. And when I'm in that place, like, do I have the ability to give something to someone, whether I'm a griever or whether I'm supporting somebody?
Right.
And I think we have to be really honest, because in our desperate attempts to be in relationship or feel connected or feel like we belong or get back that attachment that we miss, that we actually harm ourselves.
Yeah.
And we betray ourselves. And I think that it's really important to know yourself if you're going into the dating, into the dating pool as much as possible. And I know I'm sort of like pontificating about it in all these different ways, but it's self-protective, and it's protective of someone else too.
Yeah.
Gina, we received a question from one of our listeners. I'd love to read to you.
Sure.
Hello, I'm 29. I have been dating intentionally on and off for about 9 months. I completed the Agape Intensive. That's one of our programs this year. And I joined Agape in Greece. Ooh, she came to one of my retreats.
Ooh.
Oh. My dad passed away about a year and a half ago, along with having to recently put down 2 childhood pets. To say the least, dealing with grief while dating has been challenging. My grief hits hard at times, but in general, I manage it well. Something that is brought up early in dating is asking about family, parents, etc. I try my best to stay away from discussing family on the first date, mainly so I don't bring down the mood. However, I've had 3 dates straight up ignore that I said my dad died. And these were 2nd to 4th dates where they asked about parents. I was turned off immediately by the lack of acknowledgement. They were either not listening or felt awkward, but in those moments, it was important for someone to speak up and give condolences or show a small amount of empathy towards my situation. Yeah. Is it unrealistic to expect someone in conversation to acknowledge I've said my dad passed away? Why would someone ignore this during a conversation? Thanks.
I will tell you, I hear this all the time. And that's why I continue to say we are so grief illiterate. How hard is it to say, listen, I'm so awkward, but I'm really sorry that you lost your dad. Like, that must be so hard. And I think empathy comes really hard in dating, because we're trying to be so buttoned up and so self-protective and show our best selves that we actually fuck up the opportunity to deeply connect with somebody. So is it unrealistic? 100% no. We're humans. Right. Where is humanity? And at the same time, I think that when we go into something that is so vulnerable, even if it is a year and a half, you know, depending on where you are with it, I know you said you're managing it well, but I think we have to also assume that dating can bring out the most deep inner wounds that we have and our sense of fragility. And I think...
But let me ask you a question about that, right? Like, can we get ahead of this? Like, I've always said, you know, I love it when my daters communicate expectations of how I expect you to behave when I do things, and like talking about your past experience. So for instance, if someone asked you, you know, I can't believe someone like you is single, instead of getting offended by that question, right? I like to pivot and say, well, yeah, but it's just because I haven't met someone who meets the communication expectations that I have. For instance, I like to be called every day. Just, you know, you present it like that, so that way people know, oh, okay, I got to call her from now on. But here is an opportunity to be like, well, you know, I've gone on dates with men and I'm still, tell me if this is the wrong way to approach this. Maybe I would have told this listener, you know, if someone asked her that question, no, I've been going on dates since my dad passed away a year and a half ago, and I've been really struggling with the lack of empathy and vulnerability from the men that learn this about me. Like, I just don't feel like I'm being heard or listened to. And just kind of just calling it like it is, to me, is kind of like, okay, here's my problem. Now that I've said this to you, you need to turn back and be like, wow, first of all, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And second of all, you know, thank you again for telling me what you need to make this, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
That's an evolved guy right there, though. That you're,
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that anywhere.
When someone going like,
Those betas.
hey, sorry about that. I was like, that's not gonna happen.
Not gonna
happen. It's not gonna happen. I
Yeah.
also
Although the
feel like-
communication one does work when you tell people
Yeah.
like, you know, it just hasn't worked with guys because they don't call me every day. They
But
don't
then
want to
you're
text me.
manufacturing something that's
Right.
not real for them.
Right. Could you give us tips on how she should tell people, here's how I've lost, and then also how to manage their response back?
Yes, but my tip is going to come with a disclaimer.
Okay.
She has to feel safe. Because if we don't feel safe to talk about death and something vulnerable, then we've created a place where we can further feel more vulnerable and more harmed and more depressed and more anxious.
Okay.
So that's my disclaimer. If it's somebody that she is feeling really like happy getting to know and feels like the conversation is safe for her, or that this person could handle something like that, I think it's probably almost better at times to say it right up front if our expectation is that they are like going to give us empathy. Because I think the idea that when we wait until the second or third date to talk about like the biggest life event we've ever had, we then like, it's almost like we've breadcrumbed this person to like our easy self, and now we've expected them to all of a sudden switch into being empathetic and warm and caring.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a bait and switch in a way. So if that is what you're looking for and you want that empathy, and that is because you're feeling vulnerable and fragile, it's important to say it, I think, if you feel safe, sooner than later.
On a first date?
I say it on the first date.
I would say it on a first date.
Yeah.
Because
I
it's
feel
the
like
most
it's
important relationship. that
right.
you
It's
have.
also like what you just said, which is like, this is probably one of the most important life events that's happened to you in the last year.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's kind of like when people tell me like, well, at what date do I tell someone that I have kids? And I'm like, that's literally part of your core identity.
Yeah.
Why is that not coming up on a first date?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's the core identity to lose the important people in your life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My mom died. I will tell everybody that my mom died. It is the first thing I want you to know when you meet me. I
Yeah.
don't care who you are. Because it is
But only after
defining.
you feel safe.
After I feel, well, if it's like my mom, but if I'm in a dating situation, or if I were in a dating situation, I would put it right up front. Because you can either handle me at my worst, and in these moments, and you know that grief will take me down at times, and if you can handle that, then we can be in this ride together. But if I know right off the bat that we're not, let's not waste any time. But not telling them and then expecting them to care and be empathetic after the third, fourth date is actually setting yourself up for more.
Disappointment.
Yeah. And it's
Wow.
hard. And people should be empathetic. People should be empathetic. And
Yeah, I guess it's if they're not if you're like, oh, my sister died, and they're like, wow, cool.
Has someone said that to you?
No.
What's the
no
worst
one said anything.
reaction you've heard?
No, they just go, oh, I'm sorry. That's
Do
it.
they ever ask you like how?
No one's asked me how.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm like, that's fine. I tell them eventually, and then then it gets weird.
Did they ever ask you to talk about her? Or like tell me about her? What was she like?
Ooh, that's a great question.
In the beginning, my last partner did. He seemed very like, I can handle it. I'm here for it.
Is that a good question to ask someone?
Yeah.
It's a great question to ask
Really?
somebody.
Oh, yeah.
Because-
We love to talk about it.
Oh,
We
wait.
love
Tell
to talk
me more.
about
Hold on.
them.
So that's a good question. If someone's lost someone you want,
Yeah, tell me about her.
tell me about her.
Yeah.
What's your favorite memory of her? How am I being intrusive
Yeah.
now? I feel like I'm
No,
being
no,
intrusive.
no.
At the end of the day, everybody always thinks that you're going to upset somebody more by talking about them or reminding them of their loss. But
Yeah.
we're thinking of it all the time. You're always thinking of your loss. It's a part of who you are in a lot of ways.
I
So
never
you're not
knew
reminding
to ask
them.
that.
I think if I was on a date with a guy and
Yeah.
things were going well and I was like, we're talking about like, I lost my sister. If they were like, I'm so sorry. And if they responded with either a loss they've had, right? Which is like, I lost my part, whatever it is. Or if they were like, were you guys close? Like, tell me about her.
Yeah.
That would be like, she was great. Like, have fun. They can be like, do you think she would have liked me? Like, that's a fun, like,
Aw.
oh my God. Well,
That's so stupid.
no, she would not.
I love it.
She would have hated you. But yeah, like it was, I think when someone was engaged with it and was like, it wasn't scared. That's okay. So that's a huge thing, is the fear you can't handle
Yeah.
my grief.
Oh.
Yeah.
That
For you.
is, just, I think in general, a lot of grieving people, we have this thing where it's like, you're going to run at the sight of my grief. And with my last partner, one of the big things, and this is actually another thing, a question to ask, was I felt like I was their worst nightmare
Huh?
in a way of like their fear of losing their sibling.
Yeah.
They saw it in me.
Yeah.
Grief is contagious.
Yeah. And so a lot of people get scared. They go, if you are grieving, what if that happens to me? Like you went through the worst thing in the world. Oh no, that could happen to me. And then they get really scared and are like, I don't even want to deal with this
Yikes.
level of grief. And so they'll run.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a too muchness factor that grievers walk around with.
Yes.
Whether it's because of society and bereavement leave and all of that, but mostly people just have a time limit on how long they will support you,
Yeah.
how long they will ask about your person, how long they will give you the support and comfort that you need, and it is not fair.
Yeah. How do you deal with the fact that like, so your partner or whoever you're with won't shut up about their living sibling?
Oh.
How do you deal with that? Where you're like, can you stop complaining about your living sibling? Mine's gone.
And this is exactly because that's a trigger, right?
Yeah.
Then hearing about living.
Or do you just not
things.
like to hear them complain because they complain all the fucking time?
Well, maybe actually, to be real with you, that's what you should say.
Yeah.
Like, hey, take the temperature in the room, buddy.
Yeah.
It's like, dead sister, living sister.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are times where you actually have to be blunt and not beat around the bush. Like, that actually makes me feel worse.
Yeah.
The end. I mean, I think we have to talk more about how things affect us in loss so that we can teach other people what's not probably the best course of action, right?
Yeah.
We're so used to complaining about our people. And I have the same thing when people complain about their mom. And I'm like, I don't have one. My mom died at 63. I'm fucked for the rest of my life without one. Like, cool. Don't care about your problems. But,
Yeah.
kidding, sort of. But I say that sometimes. Like, hey, dead mom club over here.
Yeah.
Just in case. But then there are these times where it's legit, right? And they're complaining about something and they still are allowed to have their feelings about the person.
Yeah.
Right? Because we had our feelings about our people when they were alive too. And so there's a hard stop where you say, hey, temperature in the room, dead sister person here.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, that sucks. Like, hope you've worked that out.
Yeah.
And I think that it's like a pretty double-edged sword on it because I think they are allowed to complain and not all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Gina, Jenny, this was an incredible episode. I feel like I've learned so much from this conversation. Gina, I have your book here by Gina Martha. Moffa?
You did it right. You did it right. And then you still were like, nope.
The book is by Gina Martha. It's called Moving On Doesn't Mean Letting Go. Where can we find your book?
You can find my book anywhere books are sold.
Support your local independent bookstore.
Yep.
And
Yes, please.
Gina, you're on Instagram too, so people can follow you there as well.
I am. I'm at I'm at Gina Martha, LCSW.
I love it. And they can find resources on your website as well to work with you?
Absolutely. I do group coaching, and I have lots of different blogs for different situations that we've talked about here.
Mm-hmm.
In my book, I talk about dating in a way that's a little less chaotic than I did today. However,
You were great.
You were great.
Oh, man.
You had a lot of questions coming at you.
I did,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I was like, I don't
Yeah.
know. You got to feel safe.
You had two people like,
Yeah. Hey, what's up? Hi,
Hello.
what's happening?
Death sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
But
Not a
yes,
fan.
I think that we need to talk more about grief. Remember, grief is not just death loss, but a lot of different losses in our lives
Yeah.
actually will ignite that same part of our brain that will make us feel grief. And
Yeah.
so I think we have to just bring grief more into the conversation. But thank you so much for letting me talk about it here with you today, because
No.
it is such a big part of dating and life
Gina,
and connection. So
thank you so
And
much
thank
for
you.
coming.
Thank you.
You did really great.
Yeah.
Jenny, you were amazing.
Thank you. I didn't cry once.
I cried though.
You
I was
did.
sitting there like,
You little beta. You beta. You weak beta.
I even chose words so that it wouldn't be an emotional response. So
No, it was like right here.
no, I
It
was,
was
like,
right
I
there.
could see you breathing, and then I was just like, well, stop it, eyes, don't. And then I'm just kind of like, and then I look over to the producer, and she's like, fix your face. Anyway, that was our show. If you're not watching us on YouTube, well, get on it and, subscribe, leave a comment, tell Jenny how great she did. She was incredible the last 4 episodes.
Thanks, everybody.
Go and buy Gina's
If-
book.
Yeah, if you don't,
give it
my
to a friend.
dead sister will haunt you.
Oh, that there. Well,
a lot of them, a lot of haunting.
there she goes. While you're there, if you're also listening to the podcast on your favorite podcast streaming service, why not subscribe and give it 5 stars? 5 stars only. And while I have you there, follow Jenny Zigrino, follow Matchmaker Maria, follow Ask a Matchmaker, and pre-order my book. Because, like I said, Your Girl's Got Big Dreams, New York Times bestseller.
Pre-order.
Manifesting.
Pre-order. You're gonna. It's already there.
Manifesting.
It's already there.
It's already there.
You got to say it in the present tense. I'm a New York Times.
I'm a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, I got to get used to saying that.
Yeah.
All
Look
right,
and do
we'll
it in
get
the mirror.
there. We'll get there. Well, anyway, you know how this goes. Be lovable, but more importantly,
Be likable.
see you next week.